Afternoon. I'm Mark Earhart, the Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition, and welcome to our River Region focused Powering Ahead webinar, discussion talking about what's next for oil and gas and petrochemical in the River Region in Southeast Louisiana. This is something we appreciate everyone who's joining us today. I know when we look down and set the date for October 27th, we didn't think we'd be dealing with the different types of events and weather events we might be dealing with in the next 24 hours. So we appreciate everyone giving us a little bit of time this afternoon to talk about what we would consider Louisiana's most important industry, and that is our oil and gas and petrochemical industries. And what we have been doing as industries and as people of the industry throughout this year has been at the center and heart of our nation's response and hopefully ultimately recovery from COVID-19. And so there are businesses, there are facilities up and down the Mississippi River, companies that are doing work in the Gulf of Mexico, safely producing and exporting oil and gas, who are right in the heart of responding to COVID-19, creating products that we're using in our everyday lives and that hospitals are using in treating patients, in products that we're using in our houses to keep our homes clean, and to help our children and loved ones. So today's topic is going to be timely. I'm sure many of you have been paying attention to the events happening in and around the country over the last few months, and in particular discussions that were had last week during the presidential debate about the future of the oil and gas industry. And today is a good forum and a timely forum for us to talk about that in some of the ways that are most personal to us, which are in the communities where we live and work and the careers that we've built as the people of the industry up and down the river and all across South Louisiana. So in the next few minutes, we have a few special guests with us to talk about what's happening in their specific parishes. And then we'll move on and hear a little bit from Congressman Graves about what's happening in Washington right now and maybe coming in the future. So before we get started, there is something, and this is another timely thing that we're talking about, as we look around and anticipate hopefully some quick, but it's still severe weather happening in the next 24 to 36 hours. This is our third webinar that we've done, and throughout these webinars and the outreach we've done under the Powering Ahead theme, we don't ever want to forget what our colleagues and friends and loved ones and neighbors are going through still in Southwest Louisiana as they recover from Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta. And so as part of our Powering Ahead initiative, not only are we talking about the industry and how you can get involved in the industry, but we're also offering ways that if you're still interested in volunteering or helping out as our friends and neighbors come together to rebuild their communities, that we offer you the opportunity to do so. So please don't forget our friends in Southwest Louisiana. If you're looking for an opportunity to contribute anything, you can go to growlouisianacoalition.com for a list of organizations that are doing great work on the ground in Lake Charles, Cameron Parish, and across Southwest Louisiana. So to get us into our program today, we want to thank our co-hosts, the River Region Chamber and Chastity McCormick, and who I know is on with us today. Thank you for your support in putting this event together. St. Charles Parish Economic Development and Tourism Department, Corey Fauché has been very helpful. Really, both the River Region Chamber and St. Charles Parish Economic Development have been key supporters of the oil and gas business and what Grow Louisiana has been doing for many years now, especially creating opportunities for the people who support the oil and gas business to get in touch with the people that represent them, not only in Baton Rouge, but within the parishes themselves. And then finally, we want to thank the Louisiana Chemical Association, Louisiana Oil and Gas Association, and the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, all doing great work to try and grow the industry and create opportunities for people in Louisiana for years in the future. So to get us started, we're going to talk about some key issues that are facing the industry today, not only on the oil and gas side, but the petrochemical side as well. And what we have seen in recent months and years, and as you pay attention to what's happening in the news, and as we see the fluctuations in the price of oil, and as we see different things being talked about around the future of our industry, there are very specific things in Louisiana that affect us every day, and that is the potential and growth of petrochemical and oil and gas businesses in the state, and what we can do to encourage that type of growth and success it's created for Louisiana economically for really more than 50 years, and hopefully for 50 years or more into the future. And as we see certain groups, a small number of people who raise questions about the future of oil and gas and the future of the petrochemical industry in the state of Louisiana, there are things that we need to know more about as the people of the industry, and what we can do to go and promote the industry and talk to people about why our industry is important. And what we have with us today are a couple of guests to get us started. First, I want to introduce our first panelist, and that is St. John Parish President Jacqueline Hotard. Parish President Hotard was elected to the office of Parish President, I believe, in 2019. She's a lifelong resident of St. John Parish and served on the St. John Parish Council for 16 years before being elected as Parish President last October. Thank you for being with us, Parish President. We also have with us Tyler Gray. Tyler is President and General Counsel of Louisiana Mid-Continent's Oil and Gas Association, representing members of Louisiana's oil and gas industry on local, state, and national issues. And so both to get us started today, we're going to talk a little bit about the industry, and it's good to have both of you with us.
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate being here today.
Good. Thank you. And we're expecting Parish President Matt Jewell to join us in a few minutes, but we can go ahead and get started while he joins us in a minute. I'd like to start off a little bit. Parish President Hotard, tell us a little bit about how the petrochemical industry and oil and gas industry makes a difference in your parish, in St. John Parish.
Thanks, Mark, and just say hello to everyone really quick. Thanks for putting this panel together. I think it's very important that we continue to communicate with our residents even through these Zoom platforms. I've noticed Tyler has like the best background ever. He must have practiced a few times because in my office I'm constantly moving around for the good light, but he's got it down with the helmets and everything. So I'm going to take notes, Tyler, and I'll be stepping my game up for the next one. But you're right. We are, especially in St. John, we are so reliant on oil and gas industry, with Marathon being our largest taxpayer. So it's very important that we stay in tune with what's going on with oil and gas, that we are supportive and a good industry partner. Not only that, I'm the daughter of, my father retired from BASF, so I'm a product, I guess, of a household that relied on this type of business, and so we are just ever aware of the impact that oil and gas has on our parish. It comes up when we are rated with S&P. They recognize our reliance on oil and gas, so they are constantly asking us, how do we properly measure, where we are as a parish because of that reliance. Just so important that we maintain those relations, that we do it smart, if you will, but that we recognize just the impact that oil and gas has on St. John Parish. It fuels and feeds and funds most of what we do here.
And I will say the one thing that Tyler's missing in his background is a parish seal, which is something, Parish President, you have that none of us. That's pretty good by itself. One of the things, and I'll start this off with you, President Hotard, and then Tyler can chime in, is when we look at companies wanting to make investments in the river region or expand investments they already have, a lot of what we hear about quite often is the idea of predictability around the economy, predictability around the workforce, predictability around the tax structure and the legal climate. Are those things that you hear as you talk to different companies, not only working in the parish right now, but in your discussions with your sister parishes in the river region?
We hear it all the time about having a ready workforce. And we have a new superintendent here. Our school superintendent has been on the job, I think, for a couple of months, and she and I have already begun to have those conversations about working together. And I look forward to having more collaborations just with all of our partners. What I do here in this office impacts what happens in the school system, and what happens in the school system impacts how we position ourselves for economic development, whether it's new growth or expansion, by having ready workforce. I get that all of the time with businesses looking to locate here. And so it's something that we're very well aware of. I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that comes up. We do have our River Parish Community College, and they do have curriculums in process technology, instrumentation, those curriculums that would bridge students directly from high school into some of those companies along the river. And so we just need to, I think, hone in on the things that we do have here and getting our residents, if you will, prepared to be able to have a job in oil and gas or just up and down the river at any one of the companies. And these are good paying jobs. Like I said, my father retired from BASF. And so I'm, very just aware of how these jobs can provide for families. I think that's important. But the biggest issue that I would say comes across my desk or in conversations is having ready labor, skilled labor.
Tyler, what do you hear as you the companies you represent and other companies you talk to? I know that the availability of labor is an obvious issue too, is an important issue. From other perspectives, what do you hear around taxes, legal climate, those types of things?
So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And, we hear a lot about legal climate, the business climate, tax climate pretty consistently. It's one of the things that we work hard to try to provide insight into policy changes that can improve the overall environment, especially at the state legislature, and always happy to help all of our local officials. Louisiana has 17 refineries, producing about almost 20% of the nation's refining capacity. So it's a big part of Louisiana, the refineries. You also have pipelines, exploration and production onshore, and then also offshore. And also, as we've seen and talked about for many years, we finally have LNG companies that are exporting here from Louisiana all over the world. And so when we have the opportunity to talk about what improves the business climate in our state, it does come down to a handful of things, especially for the downstream refining sector. If you are not investing capital and to improve the process, you are falling behind. And that's just the bottom line. As products are produced, as they are sold and transported all throughout the eastern United States and into the Gulf Coast, it is important that there's an environment in which they can invest and grow and improve. And so in Louisiana, it continues to be a heavy part of the Louisiana economy. We recently completed an economic impact study showing that almost 26% of Louisiana's gross domestic product comes from oil and gas activities here in the state, representing almost 250,000 people and $4.5 billion in taxes paid last year. And so those are things that we always want to make sure that it's important to remember what a big economic engine it is, how it's important to have environments in which they can grow, operate, hire workforce, and have the trickle-down effect to improve local economies and all the jobs that come along with it. The direct jobs being the people that work there at the facility, the indirect jobs, which comes from the pipe fitters, the contractors, the people that are on site. And then lastly, the induced jobs. And the induced jobs are anything that people would have for discretionary income, consumables, restaurants, grocery stores, car dealers, all those things all have an impact and role within the oil and natural gas industry. It's a long way of saying, Mark, that it is important, and you do look at certain taxes, but one of the easiest things to focus on right now is the legal climate. And as part of that, we have seen, unfortunately, a trend throughout the United States of lawsuits being filed by municipalities and other smaller organizations against the oil and natural gas industry. Now, we are not the only state that does this, but we are the only state that does related to the Coastal Zone Management Act. And that's something that's been very uncomfortable within the state. Is conversations when you look to grow, when you look at legacy operations that are being carried into court, forced into state court, in situations like that, which are causing big problems within the boardrooms of our members.
And I appreciate both of your feedback on that, because right now I think as we think about where do we go from here, there are things. One of the lessons we learned in 2020 is there are things we can control and there are things that we can't control, both in our own houses and then across the state. And one of the major issues that the industry has seen and has been talked about is, number one, is where oil and gas is going, in particular relative to the coast and how we're addressing the challenges of the coast. And then number two, what oil and gas and petrochemical are doing on the downstream side around air emissions. And where we are as an industry is that as oil and gas has grown in Louisiana, the funds for the coast are coming directly from the industry to address the coast. And so as companies are making investments, they continue to produce in the Gulf of Mexico. It creates funds, the main source of funds that we use in building the coast. From a petrochemical side, there's been talk as companies look to invest up and down the river that there's concerns about air emissions. But when, as reported by the Times-Picayune last year, air emissions in the state of Louisiana have decreased by 75% in the last 30 years as production in the state has gone up. And so as knowing those things and knowing how the industry is so central to how the parishes of South Louisiana operate, how do you both think industry and the communities of South Louisiana can work together better so that we're moving on the same path as opposed to bumping heads against each other? I'll go ahead and let Parish President Hotard join. Parish President, she's still there, or we lose her? There she is. Did you pick up what I asked?
Actually, we're having network problems.
Okay.
And so it's kind of in and out on our end. I thought maybe it was the video in general, because when Tyler was on, I really didn't hear anything that he said, but maybe it is only on our end.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll go ahead and start fresh. Tyler was saying a lot of important things. It came off pretty good. But we did, in the meantime, Parish President Matt Jewell of St. Charles Parish has joined us, and so we want to welcome him to the conversation. Thank you, Parish President, for being with us. Just so for everyone on the line with us, Parish President Jewell was a lifelong resident of St. Charles Parish, and prior to his election as Parish President last year, he served as District Director for House Republican Whip Steve Scalise and a legislative advisor for the U.S. Department of Energy under the Trump administration. So, Parish President, it's good to have you with us. We were just talking about the role that the oil and gas industry and the petrochemical industry plays in the river region in terms of building up the economics of the region, but also getting involved in how community life continues in the region. So why don't you, if you want to take a minute and start off there.
Yeah, well, look, thanks for the introduction. Just go ahead and kind of give my little opening statement about, the energy sector and whatnot. As you said, I worked for Congressman Steve Scalise as this district director. I worked in Washington, D.C. For him as well as his special assistant before going over and working for the Department of Energy, which I'm proud to say is led by two Louisianians, Mr. Dan Briette and Mr. Mark Menzes. Mr. Mark Menzes happens to be from Luling, where I'm from. So I can't tell you how proud we are to, as St. Charles Parish residents, to have the number 2 guy over at the Department of Energy, and especially since energy is so important to St. Charles Parish. But again, Mark, thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank the Grow Louisiana Coalition for inviting me to participate on this panel. I'd also like to thank Congressman Graves, as he continues to be a champion of energy in our state, and his work to ensure that Louisiana remains a viable place for people to work, play, and make a living. And for decades, many energy sector businesses have called St. Charles Parish home. Our position on the Mississippi River and access to 4 of the 6 major rail lines are just 2 reasons why it's so easy to do business in St. Charles Parish for large industrial partners, especially the energy sector. For decades, many energy sector businesses have called St. Charles Parish home. And today, St. Charles Parish is home to 36 energy-related facilities, which create over 3,000 jobs. These companies not only provide quality jobs with an average 6-figure salary, they also, by far, are the largest employment sector for my local economy and have made St. Charles Parish one of the highest average income parishes in the state due to those high-paying jobs. Over the years, many of these companies have become community partners and have created lasting relationships with them that extend well beyond the fence lines of their factories or plants, from sponsoring fundraisers and events to nonprofits, even planting cypress trees along our coastline. These businesses are putting and investing back into the local economy and our local community. We've seen tremendous innovation from these businesses, and one example is Valero's Diamond Green Diesel, which once it comes online fully will become one of the largest renewable diesel production plants in the nation. In North America. It takes rendered animal fats and used cooking oils, inedible corn oil, and other types of oils to make a renewable diesel that's fully compatible with existing engines and is also much less, I guess, carbon dirty. It's much more clean when it's burned. Collectively, the energy sector in St. Charles Parish creates nearly $4 billion in GDP and generated an estimated of $580 million of earnings in 2019. So to say that these businesses are vital is definitely an understatement. And you know, the companies that are operating along the river, not just the energy companies, but the petrochemical companies that give a lot of inputs to and feedstocks to these energy plants. They're feeding and fueling America, and I want to work with the Grow Louisiana Coalition, with our congressional delegations, our other parish presidents, our state legislatures, to keep those folks here, to become more competitive, and keep Louisiana a place that is friendly to these industries. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, and we appreciate you sharing all the things you did in terms of what's happening in St. Charles Parish. And as you joined, you may have heard we were talking a little bit about how industry and the community can interact and both grow together, and what we can do as people of the industry to help move those types of things along. And what Tyler was saying just before you joined is that right now in Louisiana, as much as there are things that we can't control, there are things like the legal climate in the state, in particular against specific oil and gas companies and potentially petrochemical companies, that's creating uncertainty in whether South Louisiana is a good place to invest. And so, you know, with the oil and gas industry being the largest investor in the coast, with the petrochemical industry decreasing its air emissions as technology increases and better, newer technologies are introduced and new facilities are built. What's your position around where the legal climate stands regarding the oil and gas business?
Yeah, well, look, I don't support, I don't support the lawsuits going after these oil companies. Not only are the oil companies the largest investors in coastal restoration, now with I believe it's the Great American Outdoors Act, they are the largest investor in federal lands and national parks nationwide. We just recently saw legislation that uses the revenue source that the oil industry sends to the federal government to go in and permanently fund the Land Water Conservation Fund. So to say that, these companies are just, polluting and being dirty, I won't speak for what happened in 1922. Obviously, there's regulations in place now that prevent some of the nefarious activity that's happened. And as we've seen with President Trump, there's been regulations that have been slashed that have also incentivized these companies to invest more into technologies that allow them to operate cleaner. And as I'll say, these companies along the river here in St. Charles Parish and elsewhere, they're made up of the community members who live nearby. So they certainly don't want to create dirty air, dirty water, or anything like that. But to go after them now and disincentivize them to be here, I don't believe is the way we need to go about this. And when you look at the states who are nearby, whose tax their tax structures are much more appealing to some of these companies. So not only do I think we need to lay off on these lawsuits, but we also need to look at how we continue to make Louisiana more competitive for industry.
Thank you. I think as we're moving to the end of the panel, and Congressman Graves is going to be on in just a minute, one question we've asked all of the various parish leaders we've talked to throughout this Powering Ahead series is, how can people who support industry, people who've made their careers in industry and continue to find opportunity there, what are the best things that they can do to help you? Where should people be getting involved in what it is that we can do to help move the industry forward in what you do, Parish President Jewell, and then I'd like to hear from Parish President Hotard too. So what can we do to help you?
Well, look, I think, we need to have the conversations at the local, state, and federal level on how we create a climate that is beneficial to industry, because at the end of the day, these industry partners are the guys who are giving out these six-figure jobs to our residents. And at the end of the day, they're the largest, at least for my parish, the largest portion of our tax base comes from the ad valorem value of those companies. So it's what allows my parish, my school, our sheriff's department, our school systems to have the funding they need to be able to perform their mission. So we want to make sure that we strike a balance of, strike the balance of having the conversations of making them feel welcome here in the parish, figuring out where we can partner. At the local level, a lot of the partnering is just them helping with, local projects. It might be partnering with the local United Way. Of course, on the state and federal level, those policy discussions shift on how do we make it to where these companies can thrive in Louisiana and in our local and state economy. So I think the important thing is to have these discussions like we're having here today and bring people to the table to figure out, where we all intersect, I guess, is where does the Grow Louisiana Coalition come in a part of this conversation? What part does our congressional delegation play, and what part does local government play? Because we're all intersecting at some point or another, and whether it's local policy, federal policy, or state policy, we all just kind of have to be on the same page to figure out how we can move forward.
Agree. I think that's well put. I think Parish President Hotard is still with us. We'll give you the last word on this subject, and then we'll go to Congressman Graves. Are there things that we can do as people who support industry in St. John that can help you and help the parish council gain a better understanding of what we can do to help the industry grow?
Thanks, Mark. And I think you hit the nail on the head with gaining a better understanding. I think educating our public on exactly what the relationship should look like between, oil and gas and our community, because as I mentioned in my opening, industry is our largest taxpayer in St. John. I just think that there is a little bit of a disconnect between, both of those entities, and I believe better educating the public, better educating all of us on just how those relationships really should be and how we can grow smart and not on the backs of the residents. And I think if we get everybody to the table and just have some really good open and honest conversations, I think that would really be helpful for all of us. We see oftentimes legislations come before taxing bodies, and there just seems to always be this attack on industry. And I think it's just from maybe the wrong information being out there.
And that's something we're trying to encourage the people of the industry to speak out and talk to their local officials. A lot of times when we're encouraged to talk to folks, we get encouraged to call our congressman or congresswoman. We get encouraged to call our U.S. senator. We get encouraged to call our state rep or the governor. But one of the things we forget the most is we need to be talking to the people who are closest to us that we elect, and that's our parish councils and the parish presidents, and letting them know why the industry is important, letting them know how it makes a positive difference in our everyday lives, and that we live in the river region, we live in these parishes, and why it makes a difference to us. And I appreciate both of you, Parish President Jewell, Parish President Hotard, for you sharing what you've shared with us today and being frank in your discussions. And thank you, Tyler Gray from Lamoga, for being with us. And what we're going to do now is welcome Congressman Graves, and I'm going to turn it over to Lori LeBlanc, Vice President at the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association. Thanks, everyone.
West, similar movement speed there at 14 miles per hour. I know that it's still about 500 miles south of the mouth of the Mississippi River.
Go ahead.
Looking at Zeta's path, we are expected to take the path.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate it. Y'all are doing a great job today. Really look forward to introducing our friend, Congressman Graves.
Wednesday, we'll
Congressman Graves, you don't need an introduction, but I've been asked to give an introduction. So,
but it does look like
most people know, you represent Louisiana's 6th congressional district, which includes portions of the river region. Most of you also know Garrett is a ranking member for the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on Aviation and is the ranking member for the new Select Committee on Climate Crisis. He also serves on the House Natural Resources Committee, where last Congress he chaired the subcommittee on water resources and environment. In office, he has been a champion for the energy industry, and he has led efforts in the development, passage, and enactment of a range of policy wins on rivers, levees, flood protection, coastal issues, and Corps of Engineer reforms.
Just to get you these very quickly.
Prior to being elected to Congress, Garrett previously served as the chair of the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority of Louisiana. So I'll hand it over to you now, Garrett. Thank you so much.
Again, you saw what the coastal flooding projections are. Winds, that may be the biggest issue, with 50 to 60 miles per hour sustained wind.
There. Go ahead. I guess I'm not the only one hearing that, right?
Yeah, I think we were getting, sorry, this is Mark Earhart, Congressman. We were getting a weather report along with your introduction. So we won't ask you to read the spaghetti models. We'll just let you jump in. We'll just let you jump in with the latest you can share.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to join you. Let me know if our connection has any problems. We ended up jumping over to a wireless system just now, and so give me hand signals or something, Lori or Mark, if I chop out.
You're looking good.
So,
looking good.
Great. Well, appreciate the opportunity to join you. And I just want to say, I was asked to talk a little bit about my work that I did previously working for the state's coastal agency, and then perhaps compare and contrast it to what's going on now in Congress and the state of the energy industry. So I really appreciate the opportunity to join, and I enjoyed the previous panel with President Jewell and President Hotard sharing their perspective from the parish level, two folks that have been just fantastic to work with. So back when I was working for the state of Louisiana, I worked for the state coastal agency, and we came in, and keep in mind, this was in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. There was a lot of sensitivity in the state to the coastal problem, to our hurricane vulnerability, the coastal land loss. And so there was a lot of sympathy, and we were able to really, I think, build upon some of that sympathy. And we effectively took parts of 5 state agencies and were able to put back together or establish a state coastal agency.
that was solely responsible for coastal restoration, hurricane protection, and that's it. And I'll tell you, there were legislators and others that tried to add things to our mission, but we resisted. We said, look, we want to stay singularly focused on the resilience of South Louisiana. And we were able to make a lot of progress. We looked around state government and private sector funds and local funds and federal funds. We ended up pulling together 42 different funding streams. Again, state, local, federal, and private, and I guess not-for-profit funds, pulling them all together and focusing on the objective of carrying out the state's coastal master plan. And so really lean agency that focused on that objective. Now, one of the greatest things about working in that position, and keep in mind this is in the executive branch of government, was the fact that under Louisiana's Constitution and laws, the executive branch is a pretty strong entity of the three branches of government here. And so, Lori and I, when she was working for DNR, we could sit down and talk through different ideas or issues or solutions today, and generally by tomorrow or the next day, we could be implementing it. Whereas today at the federal level, if you come up with a great idea, just a motherhood and apple pie type idea, you're still looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 years in many cases to get something like that done. So the efficiency of state of Louisiana government is really extraordinary, and I enjoyed that. Now, one other thing about the coastal program, it was so important. This was about the resilience of our community. And you had people occasionally that would try and come in and make it a liberal issue or make it a conservative issue or try and drive that partisan wedge between different entities. And I'll tell you that everyone, and it didn't matter, where folks were ideologically within the organization, everyone resisted it because we understood the importance of the mission. We understood that this was not something that was a partisan issue, and that was only going to work toward our decline if we allowed coastal, the agency or the mission, to become a partisan issue. And so we worked together with everyone, and we're able to make an extraordinary amount of progress in restoring our barrier islands, in rebuilding our coastal wetlands, and in protecting our communities from hurricanes. More miles of barrier islands, acres of wetlands, and people protected more in about a 6 or 7 year period than I think in the previous 30 or 40 year period, and really excited about some of that progress. And I do think that the current chairman of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, Chip Klein, has been doing a great job trying to continue moving forward and building upon the success of so many people before him, before me, and really appreciate the opportunity to work closely with him. Now, one thing that's unique about South Louisiana is that 82% of coastal Louisiana is privately owned. 82%. That's very different than in other coastal states where it largely is a publicly owned beach or publicly owned lands. And so if you start diving into that 82%, you see very quickly that the majority of that is held by energy companies. And so you'll see some folks out there that allege that the energy companies aren't good stewards or they don't care about the coast, and I'd allege otherwise because they actually own those properties. And so when I was working for the state, when I made reference to those private dollars that we worked with, it was often the dollars from the property owners, from the energy companies who would come in and partner with us financially, partner with us with in-kind contributions, and so it was always or oftentimes a really good partnership with us. One of the biggest funding streams of all the funding streams that are used to help to restore the coast and to build levees and other things is actually money from energy revenues. The state's coastal trust fund is largely derived from energy taxes on the energy industry. In addition to that, you're familiar perhaps with the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, GOMESA, where dollars there are derived from offshore energy revenues. And according to the state's constitution, those dollars are committed to the investment of restoring the coast of Louisiana and improving the resilience of our coastal communities. And so the dollars, the relationship really is important. Now, you can look back, and I heard President Jewell make reference to decisions in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and look, I'll be the first one to say you can certainly look around, and decisions that the federal government made, I think, were incredibly flawed decisions with the benefit of hindsight, knowing now what we do about the impact of the levees on the coast of Louisiana. The state of Louisiana was growing approximately 3/4 of a square mile per year. When they put the levees on the river, it immediately retreated to land loss rather than land gain. And so we understand the impacts. There were also decisions that were made on shell dredging and timber harvesting and some of the canals, access canals that were built that I believe all contributed to the loss of the coast. But certainly the biggest overall factor was the levees that were built on the Mississippi River, where we saw the immediate reversal of Louisiana growing to Louisiana shrinking. I like to remind my friends in Texas that if we had never built those levees, that Louisiana would eventually be bigger than Texas instead of just better. But those levees really did have a big impact. And so what we've been seeing lately is we've been seeing, rather than this partnership relationship with the energy industry between state government, between our coastal program, local governments, you've seen a more adverse relationship over the past few years. And I think that a few different things happen. Obviously, the coastal lawsuits, I think, soured relationships in some cases, but you've seen this much broader and really global effort to try and demonize the energy industry. Now, look, let me say this again, and I'll say it all day long. I am not going to endorse or say that all the activities of the energy industry in history were perfect decisions using the science and knowledge we have in 2020. I don't know how you retroactively apply the science and knowledge of 2020 to decisions that were made years ago. Unlike many of you, I was imperfect growing up, and I made a lot of mistakes growing up, and I would love to have had the wisdom, the experience that I have now when I was a teenager making really dumb, uninformed decisions. But as we all know, that's kind of the process of life where you learn from your lessons, both successes and failures, and of course from others as well. But here's what really just concerns me about what we're seeing about the current state of politics and the current state of the treatment or the reputation that is being assigned to the energy industry and some of the tactics. Look, you're familiar with the Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Bayou Bridge Pipeline. For the first time, you saw protesters and folks out there trying to oppose actual projects to simply transport energy. Let me tell you something. When you look at the National Resources Council, which did an analysis on the safest way to transport energy, was it barge? Was it truck? Was it to put it on a train? Was it to put it in a ship? No. By far, the safest way to transport energy was to put it in a pipeline. And so to see environmental groups out there opposing pipelines, it was making me think, okay, so they don't want it in a pipeline. Do they want it on a train, in a ship, on a truck? Do they want it on a barge? How do they want it? Because these are less safe means of transportation. A pipeline's the safest way. Do they want energy to be released in the environment? Are they not environmentalists, or are they? And so it was really confusing to me to see those activities taking place. You saw folks out there just trying to stop energy production altogether. Just within the past few weeks, the chairman of the U.S. House of Representatives Natural Resources Committee, Congressman Graves, introduced legislation we refer to as the Blue New Deal that bans all offshore energy production. Look, you want to talk about the environment, you want to talk about fact-based decision making. Here's what the facts say. The facts say when you stop domestic energy production in the United States, all it does not affect demand for energy. All it does is it increases our reliance upon foreign energy. To take it a step further, the environmental regulations, the sanctity of the environment, the respect for the environment in other countries is not what it is in the United States. So once again, this is the environmental community advocating for policies that will result in adverse impacts on the environment because other countries have less safe, less respectful environmental regulations in place. Now, how is that energy going to get here? It's going to get here on a ship. I remind you, a less safe means of transportation rather than domestic production and putting it in a pipeline. You say, well, wait, Garrett, you're not thinking about the emissions. Okay, well, let's talk about the emissions. Over the last 15 years, the United States has reduced emissions more than the next 12 emissions reducing countries combined. More than the next 12 emissions reducing countries combined. And so the U.S. has reduced emissions more than anyone else. You know what our secret sauce is? The real key to our success in reducing emissions? Don't tell anyone. It's natural gas. It's us evolving into using more natural gas. That's how we've reduced emissions more. So if you're opposing domestic energy production, then you're forcing us to rely more on Russia, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran. I don't know. Insert country. Less safe environmental regulations. We're funding other governments. We're creating jobs in other governments, in other countries. And in many cases, those countries don't share American values. For example, Russia, Vladimir Putin's taking the dollars, turning it around, causing chaos in Syria, Venezuela, and other countries, causing us to have to spend more money on defense activities. Why in the world would you fund somebody that is challenging U.S. interest and allied interest around the world? I don't know, baffling to me. If you are opposing pipeline projects, again, you're causing less safe means of transporting energy. If you are opposing domestic energy production, you are relying upon higher emissions energy sources because, for example, the National Energy Technology Labs put a report together in October of last year showing that U.S. gas has a 41% lower emissions profile than Russian gas. So by using more U.S. gas globally and supplanting Russian gas, 41% lower emissions profile. Other countries, it could be higher, could be lower, but U.S. has one of the cleanest sources of natural gas when you look at our regulatory structure end-to-end, including transportation costs of any country in the world. And so it really is baffling to see some of the policies and this change in mentality that's going on because it actually doesn't support or advocate the environment. Now, you say, well, wait a minute, Garrett, what about these renewable energy technologies that we need to be migrating to? Look, I am all for renewable energy technologies when they make sense. And so if you I think that many of you are aware, we've had major solar facilities that are online now in the state of Louisiana, in our district. I'm very proud. I think that's great. But I remind you, the reductions in emissions we've experienced in the United States are not because of migration of renewable energy. It's because of our transition to natural gas. Now, the renewable energy technologies, wind and wave and solar and geothermal, all of these things are great technologies, but in many cases, they're variable or they're intermittent technologies. And so, for example, I don't have to really point out the fact, but I will, the sun doesn't shine at night. And so, what do you do when you're so dependent upon solar? You say, well, wait, we can use batteries. Okay, I'm going to screw up this statistic, but it's like every single battery that's ever been produced by the Gigafactory in California, if you use that to power the grid in the United States, it would like power it for like 12 seconds or something. And so the battery capacity is not there. And when you do these aggressive pushes toward renewable technologies, let's use California as an example. California's electricity prices are they're double those of the state of Louisiana. So I know many of you are clamoring to pay an electricity bill that is double the one you're paying now. But yes, I say that in jest. I know that many of you are clamoring for the rolling blackouts and brownouts that we're seeing in California right now. These things just don't make sense. And so renewable energy technologies make sense when they make sense, and there's certain applications where they do. But we have got to make sure that we're not simply playing into China's hand, because China's the one that develops the battery technologies and manufactures it. I'm going to screw up my statistic. I think there's like 123 battery manufacturing facilities being built around the world. Like 106 of them are being built in China. They're the ones developing the solar panels. They're the ones in many cases developing a lot of the components of the wind energy as well. And so we've got to make sure that our energy future, our clean energy future in the United States, is based upon U.S. assets and resources. So let me just chart that out and what it looks like, and then Lori, I don't know, give me a wave if I need the hook here. But the clean energy future, just like if any of you are advocating for an organization, a company, you're going to base your marketing strategy, you're going to base your business plan on your assets, your strengths, all right? In the United States, we have an abundance. In Louisiana, we have an abundance of oil and gas. Our energy future needs to be based upon those resources, which means we need to be developing them in a way with complementary technologies to ensure they can compete from a cleanliness perspective with solar and wind and all these other technologies. And so there's an application in Texas that's a perfect example of how you do it. Net Power has a electricity generation facility in Texas, and what they do is they are producing electricity from natural gas at market prices. They're complementing it with a carbon sequestration project, and so it's net zero emissions, and just perfect scenario there. And it's what our clean energy future needs to look like, needs to be based upon. And I think we have huge opportunities in the United States, provided, and the state of Louisiana, provided that we inform our future on facts, not emotion, not fiction, like ideas such as Green New Deal.
Garrett, that's great. Thank you so much. And I think we got rid of the news, the weather update. So apologize for that. You really covered a lot of ground there. So much to really talk about in so little time. But I want to go back to the fact that, Louisiana has a long and distinguished history of producing American energy. In fact, I'm a third generation energy worker. My family moved to Louisiana 30 years ago because of the oil and gas industry. And I'll tell you, it's not what it was. We are really under attack, state level, at the federal level. In many ways, this industry is. And I want to go back to your comments around CPRA and the good work that they're continuing to do based on, what you got started many, many years ago, what we started way back then, and they continue to do a great job in building land, restoring our coast. But you made the comment, decisions that are being made today will impact the future, just like decisions made many years ago impact where we are today. And I want to bring up, your thoughts around the decisions being made at the state level regarding and coastal lawsuits. And you mentioned it, and we know that coastal restoration and the work that's being done, there's that interplay with the industry. And it's a critical component to have the industry involved and to have those industry investments. And without the industry investments, we will see some shortcomings, I believe, on the restoration part of it. So talk a little bit about how you think Louisiana's legal climate is impacting, businesses in Louisiana, but also the future of our coastal restoration programs. I think you're muted. Are you muted? Okay.
Yeah, I was. Sorry about that. My wife does that to me all the time. So there's a direct relationship between energy production and resources available for coastal restoration and hurricane protection. Number one, under the state's coastal trust fund, production dollars, the taxes associated with it go into the coastal trust fund, which funds the CPRA's operations and projects and things like that. So no energy production and activity, no dollars in the coastal trust fund. Secondly, the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act is associated with offshore energy production in federal waters. The state of Louisiana, and I don't think we can say this enough, you have 6 states that produce offshore energy: Alaska, California, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, and us. And if you take the production from Alaska, California, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama, multiplied times 4, all theirs times 4, it's what we produce. So we are the lion's share of the offshore activity. We are the lion's share of the support services to go along with that. And so when you do things like Blue New Deal that Chairman Grijalva is pushing, you absolutely sever, you cut off resources that are available and invested back into the coast of Louisiana. And I heard President Jewell mention earlier the relationship between other conservation programs such as the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which would similarly lose $1 billion a year for maintenance and acquisition land acquisition programs for sensitive lands, primarily in the western areas. So, I mean, look, this is, I apologize for using the word, but it's idiotic to do some of the things that they're proposing we do. It would result in higher emissions. It would result in worse treatment of the environment or worse global environmental impacts. It would result in offshoring jobs, offshoring economic activity, and it would result in more vulnerability, not less, more vulnerability for our coastal communities in Louisiana. And when I say coastal communities, remember all these communities that were impacted by hurricanes Laura, Delta, Katrina, Rita, Gustav Ike. I mean, I'm not talking about those like Grand Isle. I'm talking about Grand Isle and communities up to Baton Rouge and other places that have experienced hurricane or tropical impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Just any final comments in terms of, what can we do in Louisiana, the citizens of Louisiana to help you do your job? I know you have organizations like Grow Louisiana Coalition, you have LaMoga, but I know there's a lot of folks on this call today on this webinar. So maybe you just speak to what can we do to help you?
Yeah, so let me say it again. Thank y'all for being on, and I appreciate the parish presidents and other folks that have been participating. So what's happened, in my opinion, is to just watch this evolution over the years. The energy industry was a partner, and let me say it again, imperfect partner, yeah, but all of us are imperfect. And they were a partner with us on these projects, and you just saw this reputational attacks that began happening, and it became really easy to say, oh look, that big behemoth, that nameless, faceless company. Let's just beat them up. But we've got to think about, be cognizant of, and educate people on the very personal and real impacts of what happens. And so whether it's a personal impact, like, for example, bad policies were in 1/3 of the energy jobs in the state of Louisiana lost. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people, of family members that were impacted as a result of bad policies. And then you're creating jobs, yes, but in Russia, not here. That's not okay. We've got to educate people on those personal consequences. Reducing the funds available for coastal restoration and hurricane protection. These aren't all these huge mega companies. They're also smaller mom and pop companies that are doing everything from providing the catering for the offshore, providing the drilling fluids, all of these much smaller activities that are affected by shutting down these industries or this natural resource. Look, you've got to look at the economy as somewhat like a balloon. So you can come in and say, well, all right, so we're going to squeeze this sector of the economy right here in the United States or in Louisiana. All that's going to happen is it's going to pop out in China that's going to benefit from the renewables, and Russia that's going to benefit from the conventional fuels. The one way that you can actually make a bigger balloon is producing natural resources. By monetizing your natural resources, you can actually grow your balloons. You can grow the economy in Louisiana and in the nation, create more jobs, create more economic activity, and allow people to achieve their definition of success of whatever it is. And so I think it's really important that as we move forward, we just help to educate people about the anti-environmental consequences of some of the policies that are being advanced that are not informed by science, data, or fact. And I've run through a lot of those things, and also just really the personal impacts. This isn't just some nameless, faceless company. This is me, my job, my family, my livelihood, because I work in the industry, or it's my house, because I'm the one that's going to be impacted on whether or not this project like Morganza to the Gulf gets built or not, and you're taking away the resources that we need to do just that. So I think it's really important to put a name and a face and explain what really happens personally, environmentally, economically, job-wise, and other things, and make sure people understand the repercussions of these flawed, factless decisions.
Yeah, great points. I always say it's, the service companies that are from Golden Meadow to Houma to all the way over to Lafayette. I mean, those are the ones we need to be standing up for. So great job, Garrett. It was great to see you again. And we're going to call it a wrap for the day. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Congressman. And thanks, Lori. I think Congressman Graves was wrapping up and telling us is really in a nutshell, what we can do as the people of the industry, trying to do what we can to advance the industry and talking to our elected leaders about how important the industry is to us. And he, in saying it's like our house, and this is where we live. The industry of oil and gas, petrochemical in Louisiana is a century old. It's part of us. It's part of Louisiana's past, part of our present, and part of our future. And as we, the people of the industry, and what we can do to move the industry forward, we need to be speaking out. And that's the one message we want to leave everyone with today. When we talk about things like lawsuits against the oil and gas business and individual parishes getting talked into things by a small group of trial lawyers that are trying to advance their own agenda, the only way that we turn that back is by talking to our parish councils and police juries and other places to tell them how important the industry is and that we need to work together to protect it, not do things that make us less competitive. And as Congressman Graves said, they are the exact things that take money away from the things that are important to us, like building up the coast and like continuing the technological advances that have led to the air emissions decreases, exponential decreases that have happened over the last 30 years. So our encouragement to you is, number one, thanks for being with us. Thanks again to the River Region Chamber and St. Charles Parish Economic Development and Tourism, LCA, Lamoga, and Loga for putting this together. For everyone with us, be sure the one thing we can do is go out and vote. And if you haven't voted already, get out and vote on Election Day. Make yourself aware of the issues that are important to the industry. Take a look at things like the Constitutional Amendment, like Constitutional Amendment 2, Constitutional Amendment 5, and what they can do beneficially for the industry. Make up your mind, speak up, and speak out and get involved. So thanks for being with us on behalf of the Grow Louisiana Coalition and our Powering Ahead webinar. We'll see you soon.